Hey there friends, welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about how I decide how much to plant, and I do this by taking stock in the fall for the next spring, and I'll show you what I mean. But before we get started, here's some cozy fall vibes. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. So I start off by looking at my garden plants for the last year. And these are always totally dirty by this point because I will have taken them outside and seeded my garden. Referring back to these with all my dirty fingers, but as you can see, I've got my garden for the most part pretty well sketched out. I do always add, I interplant additional things and I'll pop in a few flowers here and there. I don't necessarily record that. So every year in the spring, I will draw out my garden plan, and it usually starts with a sketchbook like this. I have filled a whole notebook of these already with different things I've designed. And this is based on my actual raised bed garden. Each of these squares is a square foot in my garden. So basically, in the fall, what's important to note is how much of whatever thing you planted. So I take this chart and I actually put it in my computer and I'll insert a clip here. So as you can see, I've got a chart here that I've made on my computer, and it has a list of all the vegetables I'm growing that I want to keep track of. And then I've got a column for how many square feet or how many individual plants, depending on what makes the most sense to me to write down. And then I just make notes of how much I harvested. I generally make this harvest section about how much I put up, and then I'll just make an additional note if I felt like I had enough to eat fresh at the time, or whether, I feel like I need more. And then in the last column, and this is very important, is the considerations. So for this year, we had a very wet, cool summer, an unusually wet, cool summer with 12 inches of rain through the summer, and I think we actually ended up close to 13 inches by the end of the actual year when the snow started falling. So taking that into account when you're planning how much to grow is important, because if you base your numbers on a good crop year or a bad crop year, it'll change very much how much you think you need. So I've basically written out, and I would have written this just on paper, but I wanted you to be able to read it. I've written out my year's worth of things, and I've just made notes like the carrots in the raised beds were much more uniform, consistent size, better storing, and that they'll probably keep better over time as well, because there's not a lot of I didn't store any carrots in the cold storage that were split or that were wonky, and that should help to keep them longer, and it also makes them a lot easier to put up when they're nice and uniform. So next year I'll be putting my carrots in the raised beds. Just different notes like that. Some things like the corn. This year I hardly got any corn out of the garden. That's not normal. In a usual year with warmer weather, we would have gotten a bigger harvest and I would have expected to get at least one ear off of each of those stalks of corn, and for the most part they looked like they would have gone there, they just didn't quite have enough time. I know that I got a pretty good amount of tomatoes this year, but I got 60 pounds of my tomatoes from 2 Costoluto Florentino, or Fiorentino, whatever, however you pronounce that, plants. Whereas I only got another, I think it was actually 32 total from the other 12 plants in the garden, which is just not a good... It tells me that a lot of my other varieties were not using the space that they had very well. And so I'm going to reconsider what I grow next year and where I grow it and how much space I give it. So I just made notes here in the tomato section on each variety that I grew, how they did, and I can use that to determine how many plants and of what kinds I want to grow in next year. So once you've got your records made, you can use this to decide on how many square feet of things to grow. So I've just got an extra sheet that the printer printed out that I'll use, and I'll just refer to the stuff here. So for 2021, we're gonna say lettuce. We're going to go with a maximum of 4 square feet. And I'm planning on tighter spacing them. So I'm going to plan for 2 to 4 heads per foot. And I wouldn't have to write all this out. This is mostly for your benefit, but this is my planning thing. So with the peas, they did well. 21 square foot was a good amount. I think in a cooler or in a warmer, drier year, I'd probably get a second crop off of them. And so I'm satisfied with that. I think 21 is good. Just gonna make a column here. Kale. I had 2 plants. We don't eat a lot of kale. That was fine. I might even only do 1 next year, or I might do just in the ornamental garden. Because it's not high on my priority list for the good soil in my in-ground beds and in my raised beds. Zucchini. Pardon me, but the second C in zucchini gets me every time. Anyways, I had 7 plants last year. That was actually not too many, but that's just because I made a lot of pickles. I'm thinking, because next year I'm going to be growing patty pan squash as well. So I'm going to grow with 4 plants of zucchini and then 4 of the patty pan. I've got 2 kinds of patty pan, so I'll do 2 of each. And that should probably do it. Broccoli. The second C in all the words that get me. I don't know why. My brain's like, we did the seeds, we're done. All right, so I had 8 plants of broccoli this year. That was a fairly good amount. I'm not sure if I want to do that many again in the future or if I want to stagger them. I also noticed that the ones that were a little bit more crowded, they did fine. So I will maybe go 8 with 2 per foot half of them. So half of them will get lots of space and grow really nice big heads, and half of them will get a bit more crowded and just be a little bit slower growing for that reason, and that'll stagger my harvests a little bit. Beets. I did about 8 square feet of beets this year. I know that not all of them came up immediately, or had very, wanting to use a German word here, or a low German word, wietleftig, meaning that, direct translations are difficult. Basically, the majority of the seed I put down didn't come up, and there were just a few here and there that germinated. So I think I would get a better yield in the future from that quantity of plants, so I am happy with that number. Anyways, this is just a guideline on how I decide how much garden space to give things, how tightly to space them, and so on and so forth. And I use this as a guide when I get to the actual drawing out and sketching in of my garden plans for the year. Anyways, I think that's all for this time. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Offer your feedback. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see ya.